Welcome to Action Energy Market Global podcast. My name is Tarja Teppo. I'm the founder of Action Energy Finance. In this video podcast, we interview people that work with clean transition. We highlight solutions and stories behind them and explore project financing options utilized. Okay, and today we got to Action Energy Finance Global podcast studio. We got Ken Dooley from Granlund. And I'm actually not sure what your title is, Ken. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. So at Granlund, I have a Chief Data Officer title, very, very new. And then at Aalto, I have a kind of Professor of Practice in Smart Buildings title.
Okay, cool. So you have sort of one foot in the, you could say, academic world and one in the business world.
There's a few struggling startups around there as well. So, lots of tackling problems with different points of view.
Oh, that's perfect. You sort of the shoulder that the startup sort of lean on. That's
well,
perfect.
Let's see.
Okay, but let's first start on what brought you to the area of energy and sustainability and real estate. You know, this sort of it's a meeting point of many things. So, what's your personal path?
Yeah, I actually ended up working in London for 5 years in my first job, and kind of worked in a kind of really world-renowned kind of engineering company, Bureau Happold, and I was just a pure kind of mechanical engineer with absolutely no specialization, and I was really kind of interested in kind of the architectural engineering side. So lots of kind of in that role, it was a technical engineering role, but lots of hand-holding with architects. So that design and kind of creativity side was the kind of the thing that was most interesting in those first kind of 5 years in London.
All right, but the I guess you were with Granlund before, and you recently just returned.
Yeah.
So I guess since Bureau Happold, I mean, there's been some hops in between.
Yeah, so I was really lucky enough to, in a company as big as Granlund with maybe 1,500 people, to start the sustainability team 10, 15 years ago. So I was really lucky that I think I've always had a kind of a short attention span. So I'm not one of those people that likes to do the same project and perfect it and then implement it for many years. I kind of like to kind of pick up the new stuff. And the language of sustainability and sustainability kind of assessment methods was kind of English. And I was there to kind of work on all of those things. So I spent 6-7 years kind of running a sustainability team in kind of built environment as well. So that's been probably the biggest part of my career, is really working in sustainability. And that's when I have a doctorate in Aalto from Aalto University on kind of innovation and sustainability as well. Not really in real estate and construction, but influenced by it a lot.
Okay. Well, okay. With the just before we start talking about buildings and data and what's actually happening in smart buildings and how smart those buildings really are, because I mean there may be some people listening that are not familiar with Granlund does. So if you just shortly introduce what Granlund is and what it does, that would probably be super helpful.
Yeah, so Granlund is kind of a, let's say, Finnish headquartered kind of building design company. Lots of expertise with kind of technical tools, with building information modeling, with kind of operation phase, software around monitoring of conditions and energy. So there's always been this kind of dialogue between consulting and kind of that consulting expertise and that customer handholding, but always kind of having increasing efficiency with that software and kind of digital technology perspective. And I think it's, I think Finland is a kind of a quite a good software electronics kind of hotbed. So I guess it's kind of what consulting engineering for buildings looks like when software is something that everyone is more familiar with than maybe other European countries.
Right. All right. So I was already hinting at the direction, but as you said yourself, you've been working with sustainability and in the built environment space for a long time.
Yeah.
And, we've had certain waves of the sustainability wave and the climate wave and the IoT wave. And if you look back, the time that you've been in this area, the and the visions and maybe the promises that been sort of made on the way about where the market is going. If you look at sort of like all brutal and honest, where are we today when it comes to smart building and the role of data? How smart are these buildings at the moment? And I guess we mainly talk about commercial buildings, not so much maybe residential, but
and I think I think we're in a really funny place between the traditional technical systems, the building management systems that would be hardwired when the building opened, that would control ventilation, heating, cooling, lighting, that kind of thing. And I think then, we've been talking about smart buildings for maybe 5 to 10 years. I think it actually came from IBM's smart city, revolution maybe 10 years ago. But I know that maybe 5 years ago, maybe slightly longer, I was writing some things and I was giving some keynotes on kind of the value crisis in smart buildings. I got some really nice gigs in Barcelona and Amsterdam and kind of got some international speaking gigs, just talking about there's very little hierarchy around. Everything is nice to have. Everything is kind of interesting, but actually what moves the needle, what has a return on investment, what in between internal efficiency for the building operations and external efficiency between being more attractive to tenants or being more attractive to customers. Where do we start? And we always kind of said, I have 2 or 3 buildings. One building has a huge smart building budget. One of them has a basic smart building budget. Where do I start? And then if I have more money, I add some extras. And actually it's been really hard to see. And maybe 5 years ago when we were talking about these things, we were talking about indoor navigation being something interesting, but actually, kind of that has been something that kind of was interesting was maybe, I actually use the phrase engineering porn quite a lot, meaning something over-engineered that engineers love and maybe their counterparts in their customer organizations love. But actually, when we're trying to kind of sell it to the whole organization to get buy-in, actually it doesn't kind of pan out. So I almost see, in terms of IoT, as being the most simple thing in Finland that's most visible are these kind of shopping center car parking sensors. Something where you drive into a shopping center and then immediately you can see where the free car parking spaces are. I don't actually have a car, but I'm really aware of them. And you kind of go, okay, so they're now all over Helsinki. The driver is something that I'm really familiar with, which is convenience, save me time, make my life easier. And I guess when we've seen, again, we're talking 5-6 years ago, when we've seen like Uber Eats or Volt apps where I can click some buttons and food comes to my door. Again, 5-6 years ago, when we were talking about hiring a taxi with Uber, where I literally press some buttons and then when the car comes, I don't do anything. I don't press any pins. I don't lose my credit card in the back of the dark taxi. How do buildings react to this? The user experience has changed, but where is the kind of developments? And ideally, you want the developments to kind of be stacked on top of each other. So there's a landscape, there's a roadmap, and then slowly and surely we get more and more data over time, and we have more understanding over time, and the full cake of understanding is filled in. But actually, it feels like it's been really ad hoc. And then previously, I've been working in, offices are always a kind of really good testing ground. They tend to have users who can learn the technical systems. So I'm more likely to learn the apps for my office building than I am for my shopping center or my library, because I go there much more often. And maybe in terms of user experience and technology, maybe there's more investment because you have expensively paid, expensively salaried employees, and there's an element of satisfaction, of retention, and of making them maybe perform better. I think where we kind of are is there's a lot of new data points. There's a lot of IoT in some buildings. Definitely with some of the smart office things that I've worked on in the past, which are show me where the free desks are in an office shared office environment. Show me where the free phone booths are is a big one. Potentially, if my colleagues want to share their location, where are they in real time? But I think as we even start to fill in that black hole of data in some buildings, we're kind of really missing in a lot of the other buildings as well. So I think we're getting there, but there unfortunately isn't this kind of pyramid where the bottom levels are being filled in and we're slowly getting to the top. It still feels quite ad hoc, and it's really hard to know who the players are and what the kind of, we would say, mature use cases are, what the mature, relatively easy to solve customer problems are that can then be built upon.
Yeah. When it comes to sort of, because in a way, I mean, what I'm picking in between the lines, what you're saying, I mean, we basically sort of, we have a lot of data. We're almost drowning in data. There's lots of solutions out there, but putting them in some sort of order or hierarchy, what really matters and what is something that the actual users are keen on using. If you look at sort of because I mean the examples that you mentioned, this is very much to do with the user in sort of making life easier. But if you look at sort of the carbon footprint or the decarbonization of buildings or the how do we drive the buildings, we being the users, but also the building owner operators. If you look at from that perspective, because like for example, energy, that has as a theme, I mean, it was always there, but because of the cost pressures, that has really been elevated the last couple of years. So if you look at from the energy decarbonization sustainability perspective and this explosion of data in the buildings, have we actually figured smart ways to sort of generally accepted smart ways to drive buildings in a better way? Or is it still just finding its way and lots of different solutions that the buyers don't really know what they should be doing? Do we have some clarity there?
I think there's definitely a line between the kind of internal operations. When I was a sustainability consultant, there was this actually in Aalto we talk a lot about like routines and about resources. So if I'm decarbonizing my organization, it's easy for me to put solar panels on my roof. In theory, it's easy for me to take my logistics fleet and buy new, cleaner logistics fleet. But it's hard for me to change the kind of routines of my organization. It's hard for me to get people to fly less and use and use kind of Zoom or something like that. It's also hard to extend the lead times on your customers' orders. You can say, hey guys, if you could order 2 or 3 weeks earlier, we could send less by air and we could actually send a lot by sea freight. So there's definitely this line in all of these questions about how much are humans involved and how much can clever people just get behind. And I think buildings are the same. I think there's been a lot of operational clever things done with waste heat, very engineering behind the scenes. But I think really questioning how people interact when we turn things off, when we don't turn things off, things that people will notice. I think that's still a huge challenge. And I think it's the kind of level of granularity of how we think about the building. Do we have a portfolio of 50 buildings and are we trying to improve the bottom 20%? Or are we looking at things deeply on a building level? And do I today have excuse me, do I today have like some good understanding of my building, but now I want to drill deeper and deeper and deeper. And I still think people are kind of working very much on a portfolio level in one way. And in the other way, I think people are comfortable working behind the scenes and capturing waste heat. And, we have data centers putting waste heat into the kind of heating and cooling system. We have shopping centers with a lot of cooling for food. kind of putting heat back into the heating system in really clever ways. But that kind of human side of when lights get turned off, whether I can turn things off at weekend, about understanding how fit for purpose the control system is. Do we have lots of, we leave the ventilation on at night, but can we calculate how much of a percentage impact that is? I'm surprised that actually on a building level and drilling down into more granularity, thinking about things in a room level or a floor level or a system level like ventilation or lighting. That seems to be something that over the last couple of years has not grown, has kind of stagnated, and people seem to be working at a portfolio level. It's actually a kind of a nettle I'm really interested to grasp in the next few months. There's a couple of reasons behind it, but that's that idea that we would understand the subsystems in a building, and what's happening and how much of an impact it's happening. Is it lighting during the day or nighttime? Is it security lighting at night? Is it keeping the ventilation ticking over at night? We don't have that kind of visibility of the subsystems. And quite frankly, I'm really surprised we don't at this stage.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting view, and I can resonate with that. What's the way to start solving that? That, if you say that you have a client, and who's sort of, say, Granlund client that's been implementing all sort of things, and whether they've sort of tested a few, in certain buildings, but that they have sort of face the same problem that you've just raised, that that's sort of the priority on things, and what really matters, and when we know when something matters, and that has to do with the behavior of people, how do we actually make that happen? Because the change really comes from people. So what's the actual sort of very practical way? Do you have any practical tips that you could say how to start to solve that problem?
Yeah, I think there's kind of huge human elements here. I know that the main actors in buildings don't want to be the bad, they don't want to be the kind of scapegoat for kind of making savings. I have a friend who, in an organization's cost cutting, they had fizzy water from taps in all of the kitchenettes, and in a cost cutting, someone at Excel said we're removing the fizzy water from all the kitchenettes for a tiny cost saving. And he was the kind of facility manager in the building, and everyone just remembered him as the guy who took away their fizzy water. So nobody wants to be the figurehead for the office being cold or dark or anything like that. So I think one clear element that I've seen is that if we do have the data to kind of change things, if we do have the understanding of like difficult things, like we have a 5-story building and we know it's less than 10% occupied at 6 p.m., how do we tell people, hey guys, at 6 p.m., let's all move to the ground floor and let's shut floors 2, 3, 4, and 5? But they're difficult things. So there's all kinds of elements around there, but I know the people that have done it successfully, it hasn't been done by the real estate team. It's been done like as a change management process. It's been done with kind of bells and whistles, and we're going to kind of really invest in climate saving technologies. We're going to reduce our carbon footprint, actually engaging people and getting buy-in, and actually having it as a let's do our best to reduce impact. It's kind of a change management and a communication toolbox needed, not just we have certain data. I know it's a big building. I know it's empty after 6 p.m. However, people are dotted all over the place and we don't know what to turn off. But actually trying to convince people to not go home and just say screw it at 6 p.m., to finish what they're doing, but to feel like they're part of a solution and not being picked on. That's some of the kind of behavioral paradigm that is dramatically missing, but that's kind of causing some of the inertia, let's say.
Yeah. And, that actually makes me think that if you look at sort of just, after COVID-19 and so forth, the whole model of people, where do they actually work from? How, to what extent are the buildings utilized and in what way? And that goes for the transportation system and say,
Yeah.
running a lunch restaurant in the office, which has
Yeah.
become a totally unpredictable business. Do you actually see in the commercial buildings that you work with or Granlund manages, that is this
Yeah.
something that is, because in a way this is a new problem. It used to be
Yeah.
very predictable. This is the amount of people that are there, and this is how we
Yeah.
run it. Is that, are we? Because I mean that's very much the sort of the behavioral change that you're talking about. And at the same time, if you look at just the Finnish real estate market, we have a lot of real estate stock that is just standing empty.
Yeah.
And the whole construction sector is somewhat in a very difficult spot at the moment.
Yeah.
So do you see that these trends are introducing sort of a new way that we start looking at the real estate? And if that is so, how can we use the data that is there in abundance
Yeah.
of data? How can we sort of use that data to start making the change that you a little bit hinted on, that people sort of moving to the first
Yeah.
floors if there's very little activity in the building at a certain moment and so forth?
Yeah. I think we've kind of hit a tipping point where I think there's some really interesting things on this. I think we've hit a tipping point where previously we had, when the building was open, everything was on. In Finland, typically 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then there was like out of office hours when the building was essentially closed. And it was really simple to see the building in that really binary way. And actually, we were quite happy before a really real push, we're quite happy to have things on standby in that out of hours building is locked time.
Yeah.
I'm still really interested in like nighttime setback of heating. We're still heating the vast majority of our buildings to 21 degrees because we're so afraid of mold. But from a disruptive technology perspective, maybe we start trying to break things and we turn that down, but we cover the building in indoor air quality IoT. Maybe we put a sensor on every window. I don't know, but really kind of testing that point. I think from a climate perspective, there's much more a mandate to really push those things. So I think historically, we've been happy with this kind of quite passive approach to, and again, it's conservatism. There's conservatism is don't annoy people. There's also conservatism is don't damage the building, don't allow any kind of mold or anything like that. But there's so much inertia in that it's almost like blasphemy to question those things. It's almost a religious, we couldn't do that because, and if you mention protecting the fabric or mold, everyone will go, oh yes, sorry. So I think we need to push that. I think now, though, the buildings are so often empty, and that maybe, Monday and Friday are quite empty. We talked in Barcelona last year that if Monday and Friday are really, really lowly occupied, then, and if it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday work week, which it is in some organizations, the whole shift has now happened because the building is essentially empty for 4 days and occupied for 3. And you even have, it's a 160 something hour week. And even with a 5-day week, it was still only 60 hours that a building would be occupied. So, but we're still controlling and everything is still on for those 100 hours. So I think it's really questioning what they are. And it's really questioning what the kind of standby, why can't I turn things off? What's the impact? Why does the ventilation have to be on in background, keeping things running at nighttime? Because the machines are so big, their standby it isn't a laptop. I think modern people think that a laptop, when a laptop goes to sleep, standby for these big fans is like 26, 27%. The older ones still running. And that's acceptable because we can turn things off, but so I think the language there is a little bit dangerous. So I think really questioning those things, maybe even with a carbon perspective or a climate perspective, is what's kind of missing. So I think then it's really just understanding a change has happened, and there might be this third period, which means the building is open but no one is there. So how do we control that then? Is it good enough to just say, assume everyone is there, like we probably have done in the past? Or is there a more aggressive kind of strategy around controlling? And I think the ecosystem and the players is kind of changing a little bit now than it has maybe more in the last 10 or 15 years. Of course, with startups and electronics and AI promising to kind of control things. So I think it's kind of an interesting place to kind of see who can have impact. Um,
Yeah.
and
And actually, that makes me think what you just said, that, if you have, say that if you have an office building that really only gets used 3 days a week, why don't we have multifunction buildings? Why do
exactly,
we,
yeah, yeah,
which is that if one really sort of thinks out of the hat, and that's not even totally out of the hat. I mean, some developers are even going for that already for some years,
yeah,
that they are not developing a building that only has, in a way, one function. But maybe that's too early to sort of say that's the direction we're going. But in a way, if you really sort of look at the figures, it's quite crazy,
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
that we are basically heating empty blocks of resources.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I've been working on kind of questioning those things. We've been trying to do metrics that reward use for a really long time. Actually, shout out to Aalto University who just finished his dissertation in VTT. I think when I saw him finalizing his work, I
Mm,
think the references are from 2010. So in 2010, we were trying to almost build in person hours into energy metrics. So it's the
mm,
same theory of if I drive a car to the office, I'm reducing the amount of kind of carbon per person if I give someone a lift. So trying to reward people that have kind of more dense occupation levels, that there is a kind of person hours per year built into the energy has been something we've talked about for a really long time, but is really difficult to do.
mm.
But definitely looking at that density is something, and there's been it's something that's really difficult to do. And the most simple idea of a multifunctional building, we talk about co-working a lot, is like
Yeah.
the thought experiment would be co-working in a nightclub. I don't know how it
Mm,
works, but it really talks about, the buildings are it's a 24-hour day that we have. Or
yeah.
the most kind of simple thing is a co-working space maybe and a gym next to it. And there's three spaces. There's a gym space, there's a co-working space, and there's an in-between. And let's say in the core office hours of maybe 8:30 to 5:30, the co-working space gets the in-between, and pre 8:30, post 5:30, the gym gets that space. And really trying to think about kind of complementarities and kind of and synergies. But
Mm.
but yeah, we are still a million miles away from
Yeah.
doing those things.
So it's to conclude. I mean, if that's sort of the direction that we should be inching, little by little. Say that if there's somebody listening to the podcast and saying, "Yeah, I can sort of relate to this issue, and I'm seeing this in my building," and what would be sort of the actions that you could do today? I'm not talking about turning your office into a gym, but
Yeah.
sort of the behavioral change that you can
Mm.
actually sort of engage. Are there some examples that you've seen to
Yeah.
work?
Yeah. I think we are in a game now where the technology is really good and we just don't understand either the paybacks or the business models or the way around the kind of routine or human kind of problem. So every time, so I've a really funny anecdote where I had a customer who wanted to install lots of sub metering in their building. Um, but the head of real estate said sub metering is a capital investment, it's a project, and Finland has had lots of capex projects lately. The other Nordic countries are getting jealous. You can't have an investment in lots of sub metering. But here's like double your consulting budget for energy efficiency for the year. And the customer is saying, well, I can't do energy efficiency consulting because I don't have the kind of data points to build on.
Mm,
So what that customer then, their way around the kind of misunderstanding or the kind of, how would you say, the rule book or the mechanics of the organization is to say, okay, what we need a 3 or 5 year contract. We need energy consulting if in the 5 year contract, and I need someone to bundle in the installation and the cost of the hardware and just give us a per month price, consulting, hardware, data, visibility reports, everything. So because the industry has traditionally seen, consultants will do the consulting, an installation company will do the sub-metering somewhere. But now, because of just a very human viewpoint, we kind of need to bundle everything in and sell things as a service. And I think they're those little everyday individual human moments that are kind of holding us back. So instead of instead of chaos in the system stopping us from doing our job, actually chaos in the system is that opportunity to solve a problem that other people can't, if you kind of embrace it. So I think they're the kind of little small things now that when we get really comfortable with the technology and when that's no longer the issue and you're really confident all these bits and pieces work, there's always a small human, either behavior or routine or I don't know, process perspective that maybe we can question. And I think that's the stuff that maybe I appreciate more now than I did 10 years ago.
Okay. So basically, maybe to sort of wrap that in a sentence or two, is that we have the data, we even have the solutions, we have the skills to do that, but it's basically packaging it in a way that it's easier for the buyer to buy whatever. Maybe it's the rule book that says that it's got to be this way. Maybe it's that that it's like you have the sort of human incentive built in, but basically making it so packaging all that so that it's easier for the buyer to say, yes, I can get through this in my organization and I can sort of argument why this would make sense.
Yeah, and the invoicing might be a mess, but you might even have to package it separately for many, many customers. But that's what moves the industry forward, and that might be the difficult part of it. But that's what's kind of gaining traction, and that's what's kind of moving things. So unfortunately, complexity in some places, but maybe that's what needs to be done.
Super. Hey, thank you, Ken. This was a really inspiring conversation, and let's see where we are in a few years. So let's hope that we are able to sort of bring a more sort of human touch to this sector and bring sort of simplicity out of the chaos that it is today.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Thanks for your time.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah. Bye. Thank you for listening. To follow future episodes, subscribe to our newsletter at www.actionenergymarket.com and select Action Energy Market Global Service. We publish new episodes on Fridays. If you are a technology provider or developer in the energy or clean infrastructure area, add your solution to our solution bank.